All right, great. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our conversation with Amy. Amy and I actually met a number of years ago when I was on the board of Junior Achievement, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And there's been a significant job change that she's experienced since then, several years ago. And she was kind enough to make herself available to chat with us this morning and be our kickoff speaker for the year. So Amy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you all.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. So once again, as a reminder, any questions that anybody has, please feel free to ask away in the chat. I'll be moderating those questions, so we'll be happy to address those also. We've got a list of questions and topics to go through, but as always, we want to respond to and address any questions or topics that comes up, from the group as well. So don't be shy about questions. So Amy, if you want to start, I'll let you kind of jump in and give us an introduction in terms of kind of your role out at HP, and maybe just, for those that don't know, kind of the difference between HP and now, I guess not real recent, but also HPE, which is HP Enterprises, since the split of the company a few years ago.
Sure. So I'm working right now at HPE, which a lot of people don't know has a very large presence actually in San Diego. I didn't know that before I started working there. And the company split in 2014. I think it was official in 2015. And so HP Inc. took the parts of the business that are primarily manufacturing the PC side of the business, as well as printers, and those adjacent businesses like our large format printers, which print all your Shutterfly books and your minted Christmas cards, and our 3D business. And HP Enterprise, or Hewlett Packard Enterprise, took all of the server businesses, solutions, and services business. So at the split, I think Wall Street was super excited about the prospects for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, given the growth of technology and data and everything in the markets. But I think they've been pleasantly surprised, at least most quarters, at how HP has dealt with a very commoditized category of printers and PCs. And it certainly has been a year of the PC becoming more essential than I think we ever thought in our lives. So it's been a really exciting year for us.
That's great.
So and a little bit about, Ken asked me to share a little bit about my role. I spent almost 25 years on the advertising side of the business as a advertising executive, and working in the strategy divisions of most advertising agencies that I worked for, before making the leap over to client side about 3.5 years ago to HP in an insights function. So I had insights for a vast majority of our PC portfolio, including our laptops, desktops, our high performance computers, which we have a separate brand for called Z, our displays and accessories business, and then a very exciting and fast moving gaming business.
Yeah, it certainly has a lot happening in the company, but also, your background and kind of seeing what you did in years past on the agency side, right? And now, kind of switching sides of the table, if you will, over to the client side. I don't know which one you referred to as the dark side, but I'm sure one is considered the other, right? But there's a lot of changes.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but I've really enjoyed my shift over to the client side, and I found out even in our little breakout room that there's a couple people here who worked at clients that I've worked on over the years. So it's cool to have had the opportunity. I think the benefit of working in a client service side organization, I'm sure many of you have experienced this, is that you get to work with a large variety of clients and a breadth of categories. And so that experience was phenomenal for me because it gave me an opportunity to see a lot of different types of businesses and business structures over the years. And now it's nice to be able to apply some of that experience more deeply in a specific category for a specific company.
Definitely, yeah. Well, and also in terms of the times are different also in terms of what, kind of how companies and agencies, view the value of marketing as well, right? The number of tools that are out there and metrics that are out there and being able to really demonstrate how marketing is having an impact on a company is so much greater and so much more, I think, relevant, if you will, today than what it was even 5, 8, 10 years ago. So I'm sure you're probably seeing some changes there in terms of being able to show that impact internally.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that precipitated the shift that I made actually from very large agency to sort of a mid-sized, smaller sized agency, because it was at a time where the industry was changing pretty significantly, not just in terms of how people were interacting with marketing differently, but also the tools and the capabilities that we had at our fingertips to be able to operate differently. And I found that the big agencies were massive ships, and they were very hard to turn quickly and agilely to adapt to the new way of doing things. And so it was really nice to make a shift to a smaller agency who worked with clients who were able to be more nimble and agile and try things, do things, experiment differently with things. And so that was a great experience to make that shift and work with clients who were really embracing a lot of new opportunities and techniques and marketing operations.
I'm curious, so being on kind of the receiving side now of working with outside agencies, as opposed to being on the quote unquote pitching side with agencies, have you noticed a change in terms of what agencies are leading with these days and kind of how they are trying to demonstrate their value to you on the client side today versus what you did when you were trying to do those pitches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen a little bit of a circular nature to that. So when I first started in the advertising business back in the days when advertising dollars were flush, and right at the end of the era where, you know, there were 3 martini lunches, but before the time when marketing and advertising budgets had dried up quite a lot. I think at that time, we really worked with our clients as strategic partners. We were an extension of their team, and they came to us to extend the capabilities, their in-house capabilities with regards to marketing and advertising. And then I think we went through a kind of dark period in advertising and marketing where advertising agencies and agency partners of many different, I think, sorts were seen more as vendors who were there to operationalize programs that were being put into place. And what I've seen now, at least I'd say especially the last 9 months, as COVID really threw into a spiral some of the programs that had been in place that we thought were going to be impactful and effective. And then everybody's scenarios have been changing. And so you had to quickly adapt and figure out, okay, what do we do now? I feel like we've leaned more and more back on our agencies for more strategic guidance and bigger picture thinking. And I think that's a great shift. I think it's a great shift back in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think, as I'm working with clients also that are looking to bring, marketing leadership in, or even, more specialized marketing, talent on the digital side or lead generation, what have you. I think there's a definite shift there. There's a definite, kind of embracing, if you will, by leadership that marketing is not a necessary evil. It is a seat at the table, and it brings a lot of insight. And I think, a lot of CEOs historically have not really quite understood, what marketing's value is. And marketing, to a certain extent, historically hadn't done the best job of really kind of raising the bar and showing what that impact can be. But that's, I think, changed quite a bit. We see people now, clients are coming to us saying, we want to hire a new head of marketing, CMO, whatever it might be. But we want somebody who has experience working with other departments outside of marketing. Somebody that can collaborate with sales, that understands product development and operations, that can even work with, the finance and accounting side as well, as opposed to being and having that siloed mentality, which I think, was a bit of a issue, for a number of years at bigger companies.
And I think we've seen that at HP. And I would say I was actually the beneficiary of a company who thought, hey, we'll bring in these agency people that know how to do this stuff. We'll bring them in-house, and then we'll do a lot of it here in-house. And we won't have to worry about hiring these big, expensive service organizations outside of and so I was a beneficiary of that because they were looking to bring in talent that had some of that type of experience in-house. But quickly realized that there are disadvantages to that technique and that way of doing things. So my role has shifted pretty significantly as a result. Whereas I was brought in to run marketing insights. I first came into the business on the print side of the business, and we've completely reorged now the insights group within marketing. So we handle end-to-end insights across everything that we work on. So I work on insights from 7-year plans for product development, 7 to 10 year out plans, doing trends work and all the sort, all the way through to working with my teams that are in my local markets for go-to-market execution and ROI measurement of our marketing programs. So whereas we used to have a separation of marketing insights and product insights, now all that's come together. And I think it's for the better. It's been a great transition for our organization.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. Right, sure, exactly right. Well, and then that way you're not operating where, you're looking at just one specific part of the company. You're actually being able to take a much bigger step back and say, well, at a 30,000 foot level, Group A wants to do this. However, Group B is already doing something like that or has ideas. Let's collaborate. Let's kind of pool our thought leadership together, if you will, because now you have purview over the entire insights group versus just in one particular area.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's made us a lot more efficient. And it's also brought, I think, insights in some organizations like ours as key glue within the organization, because the GBUs who do a lot of our product development work still have to sit separate from some of the marketing functions. But because we work across all of the insights work, we're able to bring those teams together sometimes more organically than other parts of the org.
Yeah, definitely. So a question came up from Joseph, actually, which is it's a good one for a broader question. Everybody, probably almost everybody on this call today, in some form or fashion, has been involved with events, right? Either having a booth, being a sponsor, being a speaker, right? That was a big part of what we all did, myself included. I was going to 8 or 9 networking events every single week for quite a while. So, but that's all changed completely. I know CES is happening right now, but it's all virtual, right? And who knows what's going to happen in 2022. But how, based on the insights that you're seeing and that you're involved in, and the planning, the long-term planning, how are you making that adjustment where you no longer can get in front of prospects or other technologies, at these conferences, at these events?
Yeah, it's been amazing to me how quickly we've learned to do virtual events. I don't know that we're doing them perfectly, but it's been pretty amazing. Our organization threw together when all of our interns obviously couldn't come in and be working, and we experienced the fact that many of our children at HP were meant to do internships and then could no longer do internships. And it was really disheartening for them, as well as potentially thwarting their education and prospects. And we quickly threw together the HP Summer Scholars Program, and we meant to invite about 500 sons and daughters of employees of the company to participate in this program. We ended up extending the program, and we had over 2,000 summer interns participate over the course of several weeks. And that was literally thrown together by asking people around the company to create valuable content for these summer scholars. And the summer scholars had an opportunity to see many people across the company, including Enrique Lores, the CEO, and the heads of our PC and print businesses, and have open forums with those guys. And it turned out to be incredibly successful. But I think the interesting thing that we learned through that is we learned how to organize a virtual event. And because of that, a lot of what we did in that Summer Scholars Program, which we ran, I think towards the end of June, beginning of July, so it was pretty soon after COVID, really helped our communications team take a lot of the skill sets we had learned through that and apply them to big, massive sales events and sales leadership forums and so forth. So I don't think it's a perfect scenario, but I think people have been incredibly adaptable. I don't know if you guys have found this in your organization, but I think one thing I've learned through COVID more than anything is it's not just our children that can adapt really quickly and figure things out. We are as adaptable too. We don't always want to be, but we certainly are. And it's been incredible to see how people have adapted through the times.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's a good segue. My next question too, about work from home. We're seeing that also on the recruiting side. Pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, it was difficult to get a company to consider hiring somebody remotely, right? They were convinced that if I can't see them, then how do I know they're working? And so they would look for people in their own backyard. Even though on the candidate side, employees wanted to be able to work remotely. Of course, to your point, with this forced experiment where now every company was forced to adapt, there was no choice, right? We had to do it. A lot of companies are realizing not only are people, as productive, in many cases, they're actually more productive and certainly more engaged and happier because now they can work around, different schedules, and trying to homeschool and do everything else, right, is challenging. But it's gone very well. So I'm curious, so it's a long lead into my question. What are you seeing in terms of the longer term model, if you will, work from home versus a hybrid model versus everybody has to come back to the office, January of 2022? What are you expecting?
Yeah, so we do a lot, as you can imagine, the work from home and home office space that was forced upon us as a part of this COVID thing has been a very interesting and great trajectory for our business, because we develop and market a lot of the tools that allow people to work from home and be productive in those environments. So we obviously have looked a lot at the long-term trends, and sort of what we're seeing right now is that there will be no normal. We'd like to say it's the new normal, but what we see is that a lot of organizations will uniquely embrace this opportunity depending on the type of organization they are. But most organizations that we interview will have some sort of hybrid solution moving forward, where people are given the opportunity to have both work from home and work from a space, may not be their office, but a type of physical space where they can collaborate together. So some of our focuses, as you can imagine, are really how do we enable that collaboration to be more seamless across those different spaces? How do we create tools and products that allow people to have a more consistent experience from the day that they're in the office to the day that they're in their home office to the day that they're at the beach? And so that we expect that hybrid scenario to be the way of the future.
And were the interns that you talked about, the 2,000 plus, I think you said summer scholars, you called them, were they focused around at all kind of helping to develop new models, and how can we allow for folks to work from home, or just things that were kind of big strategies, or were they more focused on the kind of tactical, developing new digital thought leadership pieces and that kind of thing?
So I think there's two things. One, the Summer Scholars Program was more focused on teaching and enabling them. There frankly wasn't as much interactive content for that presentation. However, we did have a deep dive where we put the Summer Scholars they could opt into a ancillary program where they were put into small teams and they worked on real problems across the business. And so I'll give you an example. One team was working specifically with our displays and accessories business to talk about what is conferencing of the future look like, and how do we create conferencing capabilities with our partners like Zoom and so forth that are more immersive and more integrated. And they came back with some amazing ideas. So there definitely are, we do have extended intern programs, and we're looking for interns for next summer already. So we've got some opportunities that I can certainly send to you, Ken. Maybe you have some people that would be
great. Yeah,
interested in those.
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. And then what about in terms of kind of sticking with this kind of new normal, if you will, or no new normal, as you called it, right? I'm curious about kind of how you're handling that from a standpoint of management. I think when you and I talked a couple months ago, you had said that you've got a pretty diverse team that's spread out across the world, different time zones, different cultures, different communication styles, right? And I'm sure you probably were traveling to some extent pre-COVID to see them, but now we can't. It's all got to be virtual. So how have you adapted in terms of your management style, in this new age,
Yeah.
new world?
It's a great question. I have more people on my team that I've never met than I do those that I've met in person, which is certainly not the ideal scenario, but it's been incredible. And one of the things that we did immediately within the first couple of weeks of really the work from home is I established daily chats with every one of my team. And you might think that sounds insane, that we really need to talk every single day. But we had 15-minute kind of hot chats that we did. And it was what we found, all of us found, is that it eliminated a ton of email communication and back and forth through email. While it was another Zoom chat that we did do, it eliminated the need for multiple other kind of chats. So that's been something that has helped me personally get through this time, is having those daily connections with my team, where they always have an opportunity to ask direct questions. And we basically talk about anything that's important for that day at that point in time. And then we don't have to worry about, oh, did we respond to so-and-so's email that they sent at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm in a different time zone, because we always knew that we had that time together. So that's been a great tool for us. I'd say the other thing that it's done is it's really equalized our whole team in a really odd way, because about half of our insights team sit in the San Diego office and about half of them don't. And so it always felt like those people that sat physically together were tighter and had a closer knit community, just by nature of being in a physical space together. I've had some of the extended team members that sit in our Singapore, India, China, Germany offices now say, we just feel like we're all one big team, and that we're not at this awkward disadvantage of not having that time together in person. So there's been a very positive benefit, I think, for some of the team members that don't sit in the same office as their managers.
Well, talk about a nice positive unintended consequence, right? That's fantastic. Do you think you'll continue that? You know, let's say we're talking a year from now. Do you think that that's one of the things that you might continue even, you know, post-vaccine?
I think so. It's been, because it's been so productive for us, and it's been something that I think in the days of Zoom exhaustion, which we all have experienced, I'm sure, it's really hard to have email exhaustion on top of Zoom exhaustion. And when you're working on a global account where emails are forever, every hour of every day, someone's sending you an email, we really made a concerted effort to say, Zoom is important. It's not going to go away. We can try to minimize that to some degree, but let's really focus on trying to minimize the amount of non-personal interaction, if you could call this personal interaction, that we have to have, so that when we are doing this, we don't feel overwhelmed.
That's great. That's great. And what about how that communication style translates over to customer interaction? So are you doing anything similar to that? Maybe I'll just kind of ask an open-ended question. What are you doing differently to stay engaged and in touch with your customer base, given that you can't travel to see them in person either?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's not a direct responsibility of mine, but I do have eye of sight a little bit to how our sales teams have been embracing, and I think it's for them, they really value the interpersonal relationships that they have with their individual contacts. And most of our sales motion, our sales motion is direct to clients at the enterprise level, so 1,000 plus businesses. In businesses smaller than that, on the B2B side of our business, we're really going through some of our channel partners and providers. But those sales motions, I think, have stayed pretty intact, in the sense that while it might have been an in-person meeting in the past, it's now a Zoom call or so forth. Where it's been a little bit harder is the subject you guys mentioned earlier, which is some of these big sales events that usually have been a platform for us to meet a lot of new customers and engage with new leads, especially for businesses like our GSB business, which is our large format printing business, where people are spending millions of dollars on a printing press, and not being able to see that printing press in action and understand the intricacies of how it works has been tough for some of those businesses, 3D printing as well.
Are you seeing any, one of the things that we've been doing is, since we can't go obviously meet clients as well, as we've been doing kind of one-on-one interviews, kind of like this, right, that we record and use that as content, right? So they can kind of see people in action, see how they communicate, see what their styles are, and learn from the speaker as well, like this morning. Are you seeing on the insight side, are you seeing any of your sales teams, if you will, or even marketing teams, using video as a way to showcase some of those examples of customers?
Yeah, I think one, again, happy outcome of the pandemic has been that our comms team, so our communications, our outward communications team, our PR, internal PR and external PR teams have been largely siloed. I think in the past at HP, in the sense that they're very focused on specific types of external communications. But now they've almost been, because they have some of those capabilities to develop the kind of content that you're talking about, Ken, they've been brought in, I think, more fully to some of the sales organizations who might have had these in-person meetings before and might not have the skill sets to be able to create some of this content. The other fortuitous thing for HP is we had launched our own internal studios, HP Studios. The majority of that operation sits in India. And that studio was really their clients are internal clients who want assets created, and they expected, a growth in their internal clients, but not to the degree that they had it once COVID started. So there was a real demand for asset generation, whether it be video content, online content, et cetera. So that was a fortuitous timing of when we launched HP Studios.
That's great. That worked out very well. Obviously, like almost having kind of your own in-house agency or a little mini version of the agency as well.
Yeah.
So piggybacking off of that, and actually a great question from Joseph that I think is very relevant too. You said a few minutes ago about how we didn't realize how important the PC would become a year ago, right? Who would have thought that a PC was going to be getting more more prevalent versus less? So has the marketing messaging changed at all? For around HP, now that we are realizing how reliant we are on the PC, is that part of the marketing messaging or the changes coming up?
Yeah, I think I'd say it's impacted our strategy significantly. I don't know if it's impacted the messaging as much, because a lot of what we were messaging against are the types of benefits that have just been amplified in the COVID times, but it certainly has changed some of our strategy and even some of the focus on products. So I'll give you an example. Chromebook. The Chromebook business has taken off significantly as households have gone from one device per household to one device per person. It's been, you can't have 3 kids or 2 kids in your house e-learning and working or learning from home, and 2 adults, working from home at the same time and not have multiple PCs in the house. And the tablets and the smartphones, which could have in the past acted as a proxy when you're just doing a couple of evening homework assignments, really were not sufficient. So we've really seen that shift go from one device per household to one device per person in a household. And the device makeup, though, has changed. And so, like, as I said, we've seen Chromebook grow significantly. And so you're going to see more marketing and marketing messages for those strategic devices, which we've seen have become more important in the households.
That's great. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, who would have thought that would be the case, right? Everybody was kind of moving away from the TVs a year or so ago and to their phones instead. And now, it's kind of come full circle, as you said. And I know there's a lot of folks there I can see nodding their heads as you talk about e-learning or distance learning for their kids, right? Because it's been challenging. It has been very tough for a lot of parents out there. So to that point, one of the things that I've been talking to, a lot of my clients about and colleagues as well, is just this kind of acceleration of trends, right? We were all kind of plodding along, 2019 as well, kind of, there are certain things that were coming up and different trends that were emerging, but it was at more of a measured pace. We all kind of had plans, our 2, 3, 5-year plans in place, right? Thinking that the pace would continue at that same pace. But now everything just was turned on its head. A lot of trends that we thought would be 5-year trends all got crunched into 6 months, right? How have you, at a company the size of HP Inc., how have you adjusted to those accelerated trends? And what are some things that you're doing now that will, kind of help make that transition easier next time around?
Yeah, it's been great, and it's been tough all at once. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, one thing that we've experienced, I think, is just worker exhaustion, because there is so much to get done now as things have accelerated, that we've really tried to figure out how we're going to balance the amount of hours people are working in these in-home environments. But it has definitely impacted, I think, the amount of investment and amount of focus that have been put on what were some of our businesses that we expected to grow at a more measured pace, and that really have accelerated, like for instance, our consumer services business. So extended warranties and our like Smart Friend business, which is the business where you can get help with any PC troubles and things, you know, really instantly. Those businesses had been kind of plodding along and doing fairly well. Well, now everyone has 3 devices in the house instead of 1. They have all sorts of problems. They don't know what to do with. So some of those types of our businesses have had to kind of shift focus to those pretty quickly. The same thing with, I think, some of our DNA business. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't have a 27-inch display in my house before COVID. I just operated off my laptop screen. Now I have 2 27-inch screens, a docking station, and some other tools that help me be more productive in the home. And that's, we've also seen some increases in that type of activity, you know, for our business. So it certainly have made us shift some of our focus to some of the businesses that we're sort of plodding along and now have really kind of taken off on a trajectory. It's also, as you guys could imagine, had a major impact on how we think through our supply chain. There's a shortage of PCs across every PC provider this past year. And a lot of that was impacted by supply chain and how our supply chains were working and where our supply chain kind of was operating. So that's been a major shift of focus as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, one of the actually the interesting responses that I got from the business survey that we did, you know, last month was that supply chains, to your point, were greatly disrupted. Even companies, you know, that are in the kind of the active life, you know, world or lifestyle sports space, you know, bikes, those kinds of things, yoga machines or exercise machines, you know, their demand was there. They didn't have a problem, you know, getting demand, but they couldn't supply everybody, right? They couldn't actually fill the orders because their supply chains were hugely disrupted. And that's one of those trends everybody had moved towards, was offshoring everything and concentrating in one particular part of the world that was less expensive, right? But then they realized, okay, well, that's great until something happens to that part of the world, or in this case, where relations don't go so well. Then what do you do? So it's a challenge for a lot of companies out there also. And to that point, actually, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm still waiting for the specialized bike that I ordered for my husband in June.
Exactly right. Well, I was talking to the CEO actually of what was Electra Bikes, now it's part of Trek Bikes here locally recently, and he was saying the same thing, that, you know, they have waiting lists. You know, the retail stores have a hard time getting supplies out there. People snatch up the bike so quickly that it's hard to keep up with the pace. So that was one of the trends that was pulled forward into 2020. And so this year we'll kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, that's a tough spot to be in as well. So let's kind of stay with that discussion around cultures, right? And every part of really every part of the country, but every part of the world has handled COVID differently, right? So when you're on these daily chats with everybody and people are talking about what's going on, maybe in their own regions or their communities, right? How do you manage that? How do you manage the cultural norms? How do you navigate that? Not only when you're talking about business, but also when you're talking about the personal side. How has that crept into your daily routine?
Yeah, I think I could kind of answer on 2 levels. One, just what we're seeing internally and in our own teams and our own organization, and then 2, what we're seeing externally as we study the way that COVID has impacted different cultures differently. I think internally, it's been, and I saw a question pop up in the chat about culturally, how has HP adapted and what are they doing for the mental health and the self-care? I have been incredibly impressed by the organization's response to COVID. There are all sorts of resources that they put into play for the staff in terms of things as simple as home tutors, availability for free tutoring for your children who are having trouble as they're working and playing from home, as well as extended mental health resources. We have a chat with a global pandemic expert and health person that happens every other week, that anyone can participate in and ask questions about what's going on. There are also local programs put in place with local doctors and experts for the staff in the local offices to participate in, to better understand what's going on in their communities and how they can remain safe. So internally, it's been just incredible to see how HP, as a company who cares for their staff, has really responded to this. I've been super, super impressed. And as a mother of 3 young kids, so my kids are all under the age of 6, and I work full time. It's been incredible just to know that I have the support of my managers to do what I need to do when I need to do it, knowing that I may or may not be available for every critical meeting, and that I have to manage my own calendar around my own personal needs. And that's been very, very well supported. And I think that's true in all the different cultures. One thing that we've seen pretty significantly, there's a very big difference in how people are working from home depending upon the culture and where they live. So as you can imagine, and that's even true across a country. So people who live in the US in more urban environments are stuck in smaller, more shared spaces, which means that the type of equipment and space that they have has to operate in a certain way that it may not in more suburban and rural areas. And the same thing we see across different cultures where there's more multi-member households at play, have more difficulty in some ways working from home environments because there's more distractions as well as more noise and things. And bigger cities, as you can imagine, have an impact on that space. So we've seen some pretty significant shifts in terms of how people operate in work from home and learn from home environments, depending upon the culture. The thing that we've tried to do, not only for our own employees, but also for other people, is to create tools that allow them to build customized offerings, or at least help them, give them advice on what might work for their particular situation. So I might not need really extensively noise canceling headset if I'm a single person working from a home office, but if I work in a household, I might want to spend more money on, a very important noise canceling headset and not on other things. So that's one of the things that we've tried to do most. And I'm sure you guys have seen all the pictures, but it's amazing if you just go out and look at the pictures of people's home office setups, stand-up desks on tops of washing machines, little corners where people have, a heater that they've put like some books and their laptop on top of. So people have adapted incredibly, but it was transformational, I think, for HP the moment they said to their employees, get your office space set up at home in a way that is comfortable and works for you, because we're in this for the long haul. Because I think for the first 2 or 3 months, people were making do. They were adapting and kind of just creating these temporary solutions. But the company really made a concerted effort to say to employees, here's what you need to do in order to feel good and feel productive in your environment. And luckily enough for us, they also provided some stipends for people to get home office equipment that they needed to be productive.
That's great. Well, actually, it's a good segue. One of the questions that we had actually came from Lauren also was about other trends that you are seeing that you think are here to stay. You just talked about one, which is kind of work from home and don't just go with the temporary, books on top of a dryer somewhere, but really set up your home office the way it's going to be for the long haul. Other trends that you think are going to be here to stay again post COVID?
Yeah, we've seen a major impact on the way people shop and the retail environments. And I think a lot of those trends are here to stay. People have gotten a lot more comfortable with different ways of shopping and shopping in online environments and kind of navigating the way that online shopping works and so forth. So we've been working a lot with our retail partners like a Best Buy or a Staples or Walmart to sort of better understand how the shifts are happening around that and what's likely to be there for the long term versus the short term. So that's definitely one thing. And we've seen the same thing with our B2B partners, just in the sense that they're navigating more of their device, securing more of their devices via consumer channels than they were in the past. They were typically going through more business channels. Now they're shopping for displays and accessories and sometimes PCs and more consumer driven channels, which has kind of been interesting for us. So definitely the kind of shopper journey and the way people are buying and purchasing has shifted.
And has that affected or guided the product development teams at all? So you talked about kind of planning, and I'm sure you have, very long-term plans as well, but has the product development team changed kind of their emphasis or their focus, or accelerated maybe any kind of new types of offerings to reflect what's happening out there now?
Definitely, I think the roadmap was reevaluated to figure out, do we need to pull forward some innovations that we thought were maybe a little further out and put those a little quicker on the map. I think the other thing that has happened is it's less about the products changing themselves and more about the ordering of the way in which we think about that roadmap, but also just the portfolio. So our portfolio, we typically have a portfolio that's designed for business, and we have a portfolio designed for consumer. Now, you could probably imagine some of our competitors don't work in that way, but for us, that's always been a really nice way to make sure that we're meeting the needs of specific types of customers. Now that we're seeing some of those shopping habits in retail chains merge, where businesses are shopping in more consumer channels and so forth, it might change the way, and we're working through some of this, it might change the way we look at the portfolio to say, okay, where do we really need separate products? Where can we pull some of those product offerings together, et cetera? So there's been a lot of work on that as well.
That's great. Wow. And then one question that came up also from Debbie that I think is probably on everybody's minds is just real estate, right? Every company I talk to is doing something with real estate. In some cases, they're renegotiating their leases, or they are downsizing by keeping some office space. Other cases, I have clients that have decided they're going to be working from home permanently, for really forever. And so what can you share, if anything, about what's going to happen with HP? You talked about they have a pretty big presence in San Diego right now. How do you see that real estate piece changing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, we were already on a pathway of creating spaces that were more operationalized for mobile workforces. So even before COVID, I think we had changed some of the way our spaces were laid out so that if you were in the office, HP's embraced working from home, I think, more wholly than a lot of companies. And so even prior to COVID, a lot of people were from home a couple days a week, especially in offices like our main office in Palo Alto, where people live an hour and a half away from the main office. So they would come in, 2 or 3 days a week and then work from home remotely. So we were already on a trajectory of making our spaces more mobile friendly for mobile workers. So if you weren't in the office more than 3 days a week, you hot desked. That was kind of the rule. And so I think there's going to be more of those hot desks now, because there'll be more people with a hybrid kind of work scenario, et cetera. I will say that HP has been very committed to keeping their core offices in the markets where our employees are committed and very and have, so San Diego, from my knowledge at least, we'll have a big presence there. You may not know this, I didn't know this, but HP's largest global marketing office is San Diego. There are more global marketers for HP Inc. that sit in San Diego than any other office in the world. So there really is a big presence. It didn't hurt that our CMO, who recently moved to Palo Alto, but insisted on staying in San Diego for a long time and brought a lot of people into this market. But there's a huge marketing presence in San Diego. That's
great, yeah. And that might even harken back to the days where I think they acquired NCAD, right, years ago, which is kind of, I think, the initial kind of buildup, if you will, of HP years ago. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the I don't know, for lack of a better term, kind of the team aspect again. One of the questions that came up was specific to a certain kind of a job, but I'm curious in general, how have you changed your approach to making hires, right? And screening people, interviewing people when you can't meet them in person. I know that, my team and I have had to change that dramatically on the search side, of course. But what can you tell us about that? And then anything you can, maybe any advice you can give to those out there that are looking to maybe make a job change about how they can, perform well in this all virtual interviewing environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I'm an expert on this subject, but I think the one thing, that we have experienced ourselves is that a single interview on a Zoom chat is not sufficient for understanding and for evaluating talent and being able to really truly understand kind of how they're going to operate and so forth. So not only do we have kind of a multiple interviewee type situation that we imply when we're looking for new hires, but we also all have multiple chats with interview candidates. And I think the important thing about that is that we set that expectation up front, that we're having these multiple chats, not because we're putting you through the ringer or we're questioning your candidacy, but rather just because we think it's a more natural way of working. We're going to be talking to each other every day if we end up working together. And so having the ability to kind of have multiple connection points has been, I think, really important for us. Aside from that, I think we've always embraced what we call, the growth mindset at HP. If you haven't read, I think it's Carol Drucker's book on the growth mindset. It's a really good way of thinking through not just how we ourselves should operate in an organization, but also how we should hire employees. So we look for people who are really not so caught up in a particular role at a particular time in a particular place, but rather really are looking to become a part of an organization which may at some point throw them into a role that they're not aware of. And I think, I don't know about your organizations, but that's certainly been something that I've experienced in all of the places I've worked is we reorg a lot. And, you could look at that as a downside, or you could look at that as a company who's willing to embrace change and adapt to the circumstances. I've had 3 different roles since I've been at HP in 3 years. And the role that I got hired for was not the role that I had the day I walked into HP. And so being able to embrace that type of chaos, as it may be in some cases, but also thoughtful, strategic chaos is, I think, something we look for.
No, that's a great point. It's very, very well said. And I think that's probably one of the biggest changes and trends that we're seeing out there on the search side, the recruiting side as well, is that, sure, certain companies certainly need somebody who is a really deep expert in one particular, vertical, if you will. But for the most part, people have to be adaptable. And as I said earlier on, they can't work in this siloed mentality. So you have to be able to work across departments and speak the language of other parts of the organization, especially the higher up you go, as you might expect, right? And so I think demonstrating that adaptability and that understanding of the full business in an interview setting is really important on the candidate side. And it's important for us also as hiring managers and leaders to ask those questions. Not just say the usual, hey, tell me about yourself, which is the worst possible interview question to ask, but instead, tell me about some times where you had to work across departments. Give me some examples and really kind of speak to that from a behavioral perspective, definitely. Question for you about, it's a little bit of a segue or piggyback off of that, but in terms of metrics, you talked about how you when you're looking to hire somebody, it's not just someone that's done just one thing, but taking a step back from that, how are you now on the insights team measuring success, or what tools or what metrics are you using to determine whether or not what you're talking about, what you're advocating for is working, right? And have those tools or metrics changed, since COVID hit?
Yeah, I mean, we apply metrics across a lot of different ways and parts of the business, but I'll speak to kind of my own personal experience, which is, I spend a lot of time gathering insights that inspire internal teams. And my metric for success is often, were they successful? Did the insights that I armed them with enable whatever they were doing, whether it be a go-to-market campaign or whether it be a new product that they've developed or so forth. So it's a little bit harder for us in insights to always know the true impact of our work because by the time we have armed a team with the insights to go and execute whatever they're going to execute, we're on to the next insights project. And so we're making a concerted effort actually in 2021 to keep a tether to the projects that we're informing and giving insights on to understand the ultimate in-market success or not of those products, because we haven't done a great job of that in the past. And I think it's something that we can do a much better job of. So we're putting into place some structures and some forms for being able to kind of monitor that as we move forward. So that's definitely something we're working on our team.
Yeah, it is tough. And there are, the kind of, it's a double-edged sword, right? There's so many more tools for marketing teams to use out there these days to measure success, but there are so many tools, it's hard to know which one is the right tool, right? Everybody's kind of got their favorites and the ones that they tend to gravitate towards. But the key is knowing how to use the tool, right? And how to take those insights or take that data that you extract, if you will, and put it into practice and actually apply it in the business, not just do reporting for reporting's sake. And that can be tough at times also.
Yeah, I think that's so critical to my role in particular, because if you're in a role in insights and you all you do is report the data, which is a very easy comfort zone to get into, right? Because no one can argue if you're just reporting the data. No one can argue with you. No one can point you kind of in the wrong direction. But that really, you're kind of dead in the water if that's your MO and that's kind of how you operate. So what we really look to do is, to your point, Ken, is take that data, take the information that we receive and truly transform that into an insight that can impact the way that we would do something differently. And it's really easy to rest back on, well, here's just the data, go do with it what you will. And we try to constantly push ourselves outside of that area of comfort because the data is only helpful if you act on it in some way that impacts the business.
Exactly. And then follow up and see what's going to happen. What happens after they do, actually act on it. Was it a good thing, kind of tweaking here and there? You hear about obviously agile organizations or all these different, kind of very, very real time, if you will, approaches to that. And some work well and others, tend to fall flat. So it just depends on the organization. Yeah, very good, very good. All right, so in our last couple of minutes here, I know since we haven't talked a lot about the agency side, but that's obviously the world that you came from. What are your expectations in terms of how the relationship between the client side and the agency side will evolve over the coming, let's say, year or so? And I'm thinking in terms of social media or advertising or non-traditional advertising and marketing, those kinds of things. What trends do you see, and how do you see that relationship, evolving over the coming, year or two?
Yes, I can speak for ourselves. My industry perspective isn't as wide as it once was, but I do know with regards to kind of HP, we've actually brought a majority of media planning and buying in-house. And I said earlier, there was kind of that when I came in, they were thinking of how many agency type functions can we actually do internally. And we learned some quick lessons on that. But what we did learn is that from an efficiency standpoint of acting on the learnings that you're getting on real-time in-market campaigns, there is a benefit to having some of that programmatic and those things internal, because you can act on them more quickly. There's not the chain of having to go through an agency partner to act on those. We have kept, to be clear, we have kept the majority of our traditional media operations with outside partners because they're longer term, more strategic, bigger kind of picture thinking, strategic planning. So I think that hybrid is going to be something we see happen more with agency partnerships. I will also say that, you know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I do see us leveraging and using our agency partners, again, more strategic extensions of our team versus people to just operationalize, a program. And so I hope that trend continues. I think that with the consolidation of agencies that will continue to happen, I think in the agency world, there are going to be kind of these larger players that have agencies have gone through those various expansion and contraction kind of models. You expand, you offer everything in-house, everything's available in-house, and then you go, no, I want to go to specialized agencies. I want to go to an agency who specializes in my programmatic, and an agency who specializes in my strategy, and an agency so forth. I think we're going back out a little bit where we have agency partners that have a more strategic view of your business and then can pull in the right resources. Where I feel like it's changing is that agencies are operating differently internally, so they'll have a full set of offerings. It just might not be that all those are in-house for that agency, but they can provide those services to you through the partners that they utilize.
Yeah, that's a great summary though. I think, like every business out there, everybody's had to change course in some direction. Some are becoming kind of deeper in one specific area. Others are becoming more of those generalists that we talked about earlier as well. Some are diversifying across more industry, verticals, if you will. But everybody has changed. COVID has left everybody impacted in some form or fashion. Recruiting, technology, services, it doesn't matter what it is. Everybody's had to make that adjustment. And I think, this has proven that we have to be ready for that and be more prepared for it too, right? So next time it happens, we're not all caught so flat-footed, as they say.
Yeah. I'm a little bit farther removed from it these days, but certainly from a media standpoint and social media in particular, there are a lot of significant changes that our teams are having to embrace, with cookies going away and all sorts of privacy concerns. There will be, I think, a pretty impactful change in terms of how we reach people, and hopefully for the better. Hopefully, we're only being able to connect with people who are really open to and ready for our information, but making it hopefully more efficient for us to get to people.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you mentioned earlier about that feedback loop as well. That's going to be, it already has become so important, but it's going to continue to be, I think, so that we can continually adjust on the fly as needed and find out what those trends are out there. So those folks that might have some questions also, Amy, that they want to ask you directly, are you open to being to connecting through LinkedIn, or what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I admittedly rarely check my LinkedIn email or my LinkedIn messaging, but certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to provide my personal email as well. So feel free to reach out. I may not get back to you immediately, but it's amy.winhoven. I'll put it in the message here.
Great, thanks.
Totally happy to network.
Wonderful. Well, given that you've got this full-time job that's changing all the time, and you've got 3 kids under the age of 6, you've got a busy life. So we understand if you don't respond immediately. Don't worry about it. But thank you. I really appreciate
it's all of us.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's all, I just to close, one thing that I've been so incredibly, I think, rewarded by through this COVID experience is getting to know people on a deeper level. Like, you're in their homes with them every single day. You've met their husbands, you've met their dogs and their cats for certain. You've seen a little glimpse of what they care about on the walls behind them and in the surroundings around them. And I personally, I think it's been amazing. Everybody, all my staff know my kids now. They know when Connor's crying. They know when London needs to go outside because she's too pent up. I think it's been an opportunity for us to connect with our worker friends and family on a more human level. And so I've thought it's pretty cool.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I agree. I mean, who would have thought we'd be able to see the insides of all these celebrities' homes and our coworkers' homes and everything else, right? So, plus it's a great conversation starter to see, you know, a baseball hat hanging on the back wall or, you know, whatever it might be. So I agree that that human touch has been a very positive unintended consequence, which has been fantastic. So thank you. And to that point, thank you
Thank you so much.
personally for sharing all your time, also and sharing your insights as well. I mean, you have a lot going on. I realize there's a lot of change out there. It's a very fluid environment. So it's really helpful and really interesting to get the perspective from someone like you in the role that you're in, but also from a company as large as HP Inc. It really helps quite a bit. So thank you for sharing that.
Great. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And it's been really nice. I like the breakout session and meeting some of you guys more intimately. So I look forward to joining you in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we will see you all back here next month. Same bat time, same bat channel, as they say. We are going to be talking about the rise of the fractional C-suite with Sharon Spooler from Chief Outsiders. And then we have the CEO of Conduent, a very large public company, coming in. He's a former Blue Angel pilot. He's coming in to speak about leadership in March. And then hopefully in April, we'll have someone from a very large beverage company that I can't name yet, but that is in the works now as well. So lots of great speakers coming up over the next several months. So we hope to see you back here. Any questions about the group, please let me know. And Elaine or myself will be happy to share insights with you as well. So have a great week. Be healthy, be safe out there. And thanks for joining us. Take care.